This is OverDrive on TSN 4, TSN 1050, and the iHeartRadio app. But Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog are enjoying the summer, doing something. Not with each other, though, as we've talked about many times, that they're very happy to be away from each other at this point of the year. But I, Brendan Dunlop, am very happy to be alongside Dave Feschuk this week on OverDrive. We've talked a plenty. We'll get into some soccer naturally a little bit later. Amy Walsh is going to join us later in the hour. We'll talk a little hockey with Martin Biron in a little bit. Do you feel that you've got like summer contract fatigue when it comes to talking about hockey?
No, I don't
either. I think I expected to at this point.
Yeah.
Especially because I wasn't expecting to have a Nylander or a Matthews deal to be talking about or to be in the rearview mirror. But it's been different this season. I can't really put my finger onto why I don't feel as annoyed as I may have been previously with all the contract talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is definitely a fatigue there. I think with Nylander, I think there's an assumption that Nylander is going to play hardball because he did last time and he won.
And because
against
of
Kyle Dubas,
who his father is.
Yeah,
and that's just his MO.
Family has a reputation. The agent is a very good negotiator, very hard negotiator in Louis Gross. So, but I think with Matthews, I think, you know, I'm sure Matthews is trying to get a deal that suits him, but I think there's also an understanding he's got to be careful here because if the number's too high and the term is too short, there's going to be blowback at this town, right? And so I think whether or not he cares about that, who knows? But I think we know the blowback on contracts. Mitch Marner's a good testament to that. That can make your life difficult in this city.
He strikes me as someone that cares about it less, that I think can kind of, not brush it aside, but someone who knows it's coming and doesn't seem as fazed by it.
Yeah.
It's in general, I think there's a lot of guys in that generation that they're dialed in, they're focused on their work. That's not to say that they're not affected by, some things and certainly the chatter and some negativity, or can be at times. But I think that there's some guys where it just doesn't seem to affect the same degree.
Look, if you can be that guy, right? If you can be that guy, and if you don't tune into social media and you don't listen to the noise, you don't read the papers or the websites or the Twitter feeds or the Instagram accounts, you should be that guy. If you can be that guy, you should be that guy. That's a hard guy to be, though.
It is.
These guys are growing up on their phones just like every other kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you from firsthand experience, those guys read a lot. They see a lot. And it's not just the funny thing about it that I find hilarious and silly, and I tell them this if I get a chance, is I've heard many players get fazed by just random tweets from random people that they don't know, random anonymous people that they don't know. It's not like, Darren Dreger, TSN. It's not like they're not getting fazed by the mainstream media's criticisms of them. They're getting fazed by, haters, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And I'm shocked by that. I think it's really not good for your mental health to be reading what the haters are saying about you. But guys do it.
Mm-hmm. I guess it depends sometimes it doesn't depend on who it's coming from, but maybe, I guess, what chord it is that they hit, depending on what that insecurity or that sensitivity is that you might have. And if it came from someone that you're around on a daily basis, maybe it doesn't affect you as much. Or I say that as someone in the media room, you're like, of course he was going to say that. Whereas like the fan pointed it out, the fan that shouldn't know as much, the fan that shouldn't see everything, they pick on you for that specifically. Maybe that's the trigger. Could be.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, look, I know teams. I've spoken to executives and agents that spend a lot of time trying to get guys to deal with it better, or maybe trying to encourage guys not to look at it, trying to encourage guys to, do everything they can to just keep blinders onto the season and not get into the weeds of what people are saying about your season. But it's easier said than done because guess what? The phone's in your hand. The X app and the Instagram app are on the phone.
You're not calling it X. Come on. Actually,
called.
But you're in speak, you are calling it X?
You're right. You really can't call it X. I'm kind of calling it X because I find it so ridiculous that it's called X now.
I think it's going to take a while. Like they almost went too. I understand to change the name completely, but they went too hard. It's going to take a while because Twitter was so in the culture and in our speak, in the way we speak. But you're right about seeing the tweets. If someone tweets right now and tells me that my hair sucks, that won't faze me. but I just saw Glenn Sheeler in the hallway. And if he commented on how many grays I had since the last time I saw him, it would have broken me. Luckily, he didn't say that. But time to talk a little hockey as we continue the conversation on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Joining us is former NHL goaltender and TSN hockey analyst, Martin Biron. Marty, how are you, man?
I'm doing really good. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're good. Having some fun, talking about a multitude of things. We got some Taylor Swift in there to get us a whole segment of conversation. It's the summer, man. So we're getting up to different things. As you were, we've got some sound of you yesterday trying your hand at a different sport in the broadcast booth. You were doing some Buffalo Bison's play-by-play. You were in the booth for a minute, so let's have a listen to how that went for you.
It was really good. And there you get a fly ball, shallow center. The shortstop is there, and he makes the grab for the first out. There you go.
Hey, it's like you've been here all year long.
I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I'm leaving.
How much fun was that in the baseball booth?
It was fun. So Saturday night was hockey day at the ballpark for the Buffalo Bison, so it was great. Danny Gare was there throwing out the first pitch. Me and Rhett Warner were there signing autographs. It was fantastic. So I have to admit, this was a complete hijack by me in the radio booth because Pat Malacaro and Dukes McGuire have been doing it, and they do a fantastic job. So they're like, come on for a half an inning. And I went out there, and look, I know baseball, right? Like, you talk in between pitches, but then you shut up because if there's a play, you got to let people know on radio, is it a strike or ball, what's happening? But as soon as I saw the ball getting hit, I'm like, I'm calling this one. Get out of my way. I'm calling it, and I had a lot of fun. So I hijacked it on purpose because I had been preparing for this for a long time.
Man, I love that. It must, it's a totally different experience. Obviously, you're used to being on the media side of things now, having been the player for a long time. But play-by-play is its own thing. So to get up in the booth, that's pretty cool. Also, we just saw a look at that on TSN4. Those Buffalo Sabres colored Bison's gear, like that's got to be selling like hotcakes. That looks good in those colors.
Oh man, they're so good. The hat is so nice. And I understand that, with the NHL, you got to put in the request years in advance. So you're going to do some special jerseys, third jerseys. But that logo of a baseball with a buffalo in the middle of it and the gold and the royal blue, it looks fantastic. So, look, the Bisons have been in Buffalo for a long time, and now with the partnership with the Blue Jays, I've watched a lot of Blue Jays baseball this summer. I love the Jays. I actually became more of a fan of the Jays when they came to Buffalo, and it was great going to see Blue Jays baseball in Buffalo. But now you watch them kind of growing up with the Bisons and then moving on to the Blue Jays. All these guys were here in Buffalo and then moved on to the Blue Jays, so it's great to see.
Marty, speaking of play-by-play and how it can affect people, I was listening to some of the radio coming out of the Buffalo area last week after the passing of Rick Jeanneret, the legendary Sabres play-by-play man. And, man, I mean, they basically just devoted the entire day talking about Rick Jeanneret and his impact on the Buffalo community. What was that like for you to share in the celebration of such an important figure in the Sabres history's life?
It was really hard. I won't lie. Thursday night when I found out, and obviously, internally, I talked to Rob Ray, I talked to Brian Duff, I talked to a lot of people that we worked with Rick Jeanneret, and it was hard. We cried, we laughed, we cried again, and then Friday morning, we do a radio TV show an hour a day from 12 to noon every day here talking hockey in Buffalo, but we're like, okay, we need more time. Like 1 hour is not going to do it justice. So we ended up having 3 hours from 12 to 3 on Friday. And I started texting people, right? I started texting players like Ryan Miller and Danny Gare and Lindy Ruff, who played and coached here. We ended up getting Doc Emmerich, the legendary play-by-play NHL on NBC announcer. We ended up getting so many people that came on the show to share their relationship with Rick Jeanneret, what he meant to them and what he meant to the organization. It was hard. It was therapeutic to listen to the fans and read the fans' comments on Twitter. I'm not going to call it X, guys. I'm calling it Twitter.
There you go.
To read the fans on Twitter and on Instagram what their personal experience was like. So, I saw RJ a month ago, We had an autograph signing in Buffalo, a charity event. And, RJ was like every other day, he wouldn't let you know that maybe he was having some health issues. He was smiling, telling stories. The fans loved on him. He loved on the fans back. It was great. But it happened fast, and it's a colossal loss. I'm not even saying like for the Sabres and their fan base, but for Buffalo in general and Southern Ontario, it's a massive loss.
Such a recognizable voice and such a beloved figure, especially for that team who had some great years, who also had some real down years, to have like that familiar voice that so many people loved. Massive loss. And I think about one of the last few kind of classic voices, and I'm happy that he was in this period where we did have Twitter or X and Instagram and YouTube clips, so that more than just the Buffalo market could hear a voice like that. Yeah. Some great voice. Vin Scully got a little bit of that at the end, but like Ernie Harwell missed out on that. There's so many great voices, cheeks you could say didn't kind of get outside of their market. But Rick Jeanneret is a big voice and a big figure in the sport.
Well, when I was a kid, I was 14, 15 years old, and I would get up in the morning and watch the highlight shows on RDS, right? And the French version of TSN. And I didn't know who the play-by-play guys were with the other teams. I didn't know who was in Chicago and Detroit or in Pittsburgh, but I knew Rick Jeanneret was in Buffalo. Why? Because it was the A days of La Fontaine and McGillney and Dominic Hasek and, Rob Ray getting in fights and losing his jersey and Rick Jeanneret calling him like he was calling a boxing match. Like it was like those highlights. I grew up with those highlights, even though I wasn't a Sabres fan. And then I became Sabres property through the draft. And then all of a sudden this guy's calling my saves and calling my games and he's making me look good because it was never our fault. It was never the player's fault. And the energy and the emotion, even if we were down 4-0 and I made a big save, he would celebrate the save. And I'm like, this guy makes us look so much better than we are, and you got to give him credit for that. And the last 12 years in Buffalo has been tough. Yeah. And I would say people would tune into the games on TV to listen to Rick Jeanneret. He was the MVP for the last 12 years because people would want to listen to RJ.
Oh. Hey, Marty, I was going to ask you, segueing into a little bit of hockey talk, you talk about the tough times in Buffalo, missed the playoffs this year by a point. What's your level of belief in Devon Levi? Because there's a feeling like if this guy can be the real deal in net, suddenly you might have something there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you may have something there. I think Devon Levi is going to be a really, really good NHL goaltender, but he's just coming off a college career, right? And he played some games down the stretch, and he did extremely well. But playing 8 games or playing 55 in the regular season, it's totally different. So I'm going to reserve judgment on the goalie situation until I see them all in training camp. But the one thing that I know, and it was apparent at the end of the season, and it's been apparent when you listen to Don Granato and Kevin Adams talk in Buffalo, is they want to play better defensively. And if Matthias Samuelsson can stay healthy as a partner to Rasmus Dahlin, and if Connor Clifton, which they signed as a free agent from Boston, can be a great second pair with Owen Power, look out. Like, that top 4 could be really something for Buffalo, and they would be better defensively. Last year, Samuelsson was hurt for about 30 games. At times, they were playing Dahlin and Power together because they didn't have any other option. So if they can stay healthy, I think their top 4 is going to be good. It should help Levi. It should help Luukkonen. It should help Comrie. Whoever is playing in that, if they're better than 28 in goals against at 5-on-5 last year, it's going to help.
What do you think about the Leafs goaltending situation this year? How much action do you think Joseph Woll will get, and what that tandem will look like in Toronto?
Samsonov, I felt played really well last year.
Yeah.
There was some health issues, obviously, and both Toronto's had to deal with that for a while now. Samsonov last year, Campbell, prior to that, Freddie Anderson prior to that. So I think it's got to be kind of sickening to Leafs fans to know that, hey, we need a healthy goaltender. So if Samsonov is healthy and plays 55, 60 games, great. I really like Joseph Woll. I think he did really good last year, but again, I'm going to reserve judgment on him. I want to see, can he take the step forward? Can he play 30 games maybe? If Samsonov is hurt, can you trust Joseph Woll to play 5 or 6 in a row? That's still, not confirmed, and that's still not something that you can trust. But he has all the talent. He's at a good age now to be able to step into the NHL. So if Samsonov holds up like he did last year, playing well but now staying healthy, I think the Leafs should be fine in that department. And it's just a matter of putting it all together. And they took a step forward last year, but they need to take another step forward this year for that group.
Well, and you talk about reserving judgment on Joseph Woll, Marty. I mean, the Maple Leafs are reserving judgment as well, at least if you judge by the fact that they've brought in Martin Jones at age 33 to be a more veteran presence, a more proven NHL goaltender on standby if indeed Woll does not turn out. What does Martin Jones have left in the tank in your view?
Well, look, I was never a big fan of Martin Jones. In this day and age, stiff goaltenders have to, be more athletic. I don't want to call them acrobatic because that's not really the quality I'm looking for, but they have to be limber. They have to be flexible. They have to move. I feel like Martin Jones is very stiff. When he was at his best with San Jose, he reminded me a lot of Connor Hellebuck. It was all about positioning, some reactionary save, but a lot of positional save and letting the puck hit you. But I feel like he's lost that. So now, yes, he's a guy that played well last year at the start of the season with Seattle, but then again fell into old habits, giving up bad goals. His reaction time and his movement time is not what it was once. And so now he's borderline NHL goaltender, but he still has the experience. And if Joseph Woll can't give you good enough backup role type goaltending, I know Martin Jones will do it. He'll play a game every 10 days, and at least he'll give you backup style goaltending. But the Leafs want more than that. They want more than a backup. They want somebody that can compete with Ilya Samsonov. I don't think Martin Jones can compete with Samsonov, but I think Joseph Woll could push it a little bit.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree with you there. And you talk about the differences in how quick it's changed for a goaltender to be as more agile than they were previously. Of course, you've always had to be agile to be a goaltender in the NHL, but it's one of the noticeable trends. I don't think you're going to see as many guys in their late 30s as we may have seen in previous generations, right? Sticking with goaltenders though, since we're speaking with you, Martin Biron on OverDrive, Stuart Skinner had such a great rookie season for the Oilers, heading into a season with I think more expectation, more pressure on them out there in Edmonton. How do you think this year will go for him? Any worries of a step back?
Well, I mean, there was a step back in the playoffs last year, right? And if you look at their arch nemesis to the south, what happened with Jacob Markstrom in the playoffs against the Oilers 2 years ago, it translated into bad play in the regular season this year. Sometimes you have that hangover depending how your season ends. Number one, I think if I'm in the Oilers locker room, I sage the area around the goaltenders, lockers, because even Jack Campbell, who was supposed to come into the Oilers and be their guy, it wasn't that last year, and he went through equipment change, and it felt like he was searching a lot last year. Stuart Skinner had it easy in the regular season, or easier, I should say. He played really well, but there was a lot of pressure in the playoffs, and it did not go well. So, again, it depends on how he can handle the pressure. If Jack Campbell plays well and they have a tandem going, I'm pretty sure that Stuart Skinner is going to do fine. But if Jack Campbell does not play well, or if he's hurt for a longer period, and all the pressure falls on Stuart Skinner as the number one guy, he needs to step up. And for me, it's a lot more mental than physical. When I watched Stuart Skinner last year in the playoffs, and that's really what I would focus on with him is routine. How do you practice in preparation to a game? How do you do video? How do you recap a game? You need to always evolve and adjust. That's where I would focus on with Skinner. He has the ability. He has the size. He's proven it. It becomes more mental now than physical.
Marty, Toronto's a bit of a sleepy town this time of year, late August, not a lot of hockey talk outside of the occasional conversation like this one. But At what point, given your vast veteran experience watching this league closely, at what point is it appropriate for Maple Leaf fans to get a little jittery, maybe push a panic button if Auston Matthews isn't signed? Is it the beginning of training camp where you start to get concerned? Is it the season opener where you start to really bite your nails? How do you see it?
Well, I'd like to say December 1st, but I think people are going to say, you're crazy. If he's not signed by the first day of regular season, bye-bye, Matthews. But listen, you still have October, November. But at some point, like when you get past American Thanksgiving, and then you have a better understanding of where you are in the standings, and if Auston Matthews somehow breaks through with 20 goals in the first 25 games, and you're at December 1st or mid-December, and it looks like he's going to score 50-plus, maybe on pace for 60, all of a sudden it becomes harder and harder to get the contract done, right? Because they don't have the cap space. I really feel that, retaining that core group again this year is a mistake. I would have been the first one to say, Willie Nylander's got to go. You need that money to invest into somewhere. I feel that if you get to American Thanksgiving and Matthews isn't signed, let's ring the bells and the red lights on and whatnot. I think that's when you can panic. If it's not done by the start of the regular season, it's worrisome. But if it's not done by December 1st, now I'm pressing panic.
Well said, Martin Biron, what the Leafs are dealing with. Defensively, obviously there's concerns on that Leafs blue line, but how do you think, do you think that we might see them have to make adjustments, or are they going to be able to start the season in a situation that puts them in a better place than they were last season defensively?
Well, listen, defensively, again, tell me, are you better now than you were a year ago or 2 years ago? I think what the Leafs have tried to do is build through, their system, and then hopefully everybody takes a step forward. Hopefully maybe you add some experienced leadership on the back end. For me, it's system. It's not so much the players that you have. I think their D-core could be good enough. But what I haven't seen from the Leafs is a buy-in, right, to say we are going to defend. They can score. Don't get me wrong. They will score on the power play. They will score 5-on-5 just with their talent. I still believe that they need a little bit more buy-in in a defensive-type game. I played with defensive coaches. John Tortorella is a defensive coach. And, man, we didn't always have the best defensive group of 6 defensemen, but everybody bought into the system. Lindy Ruff, for a long time, was a defensive coach. He changed into an offensive coach because he had the right team. But defensive coaches are what I liked as a goaltender. I almost feel like Sheldon Keefe has to turn around maybe and say we're going to focus on our defensive system, and that's going to take us a long way. So their D-core is fine, but it's their system that I believe needs to be a little bit adjusted.
Not surprised at all to hear that Marty loved playing for John Tortorella, who had every single player blocking shots in front of him. Right?
Exactly.
Not surprised at all, Marty.
It was easy. I mean, if there was 75 shot attempts, there was 25 shots on goal. 2 out of 3 shots never made it on net. Either they missed the net or they got blocked. I'd sign up for that every day of the week.
That's hard to beat, Marty. It's, I was going to ask you, looking at the bigger picture of the league, last year we had a big scoring surge. I think it was the highest scoring season in the league since the early 90s. Save percentage was way, way down from its height, a few years back where goaltenders were really dominating. If you sort of had to look into your crystal ball as somebody who keeps an eye on these things, do you think that's going to even out, or are we heading toward a place where the shooters are just getting so much better? You're going to have Connor Bedard running his magic into the league this season with the Chicago Blackhawks. Have the shooters kind of broken through here, and are we headed for more scoring and save percentage continuing to go down, or how do you see it sort of playing out from here?
Well, I think the shooters have gotten better. They're smarter. Listen, when we used to do goalie practices before going on the ice for the full team practice, it was like pulling teeth to get shooters on the ice. It's, hey, we're going to do a half hour with the goalies. Who wants to come and shoot? And you had to pick the rookies because the veterans are like, I don't want to go out there. You know what now? The veterans want to go out there. The goal scorers want to go out there. Why? Because they learn as much about the goalies and how the goalies react to situation. It helps them. And everybody says, getting beat short side over the shoulder when the goaltender is reverse VH is a bad goal. It's not a bad goal. It's a perfectly executed smart play by the shooter to recognize the situation or to recognize where the holes are or to recognize that, like how to beat a goaltender when they open up on rebounds. I feel like the shooters have gotten better, and now it's the goalie's turn to readjust. I don't expect the save percentage to go up next year. And the big reason for that is that we're using 100-plus goalies a year now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's 32 teams, and some teams like the Ottawa Senators last year used 8 goalies or whatnot. I mean,
Wow.
At some point, the quality of goaltenders that you're putting in net is dropping off. Now, if we use only 80 goalies next year, 85, maybe 90, okay, I could see the same percentage go up on average. But if we use 105, 110, I think it's going to be exactly where it was last year, and it's going to be the shooters that are going to put up big numbers again because of the amount of goalies we're using.
Marty, I love talking hockey with you, man. Thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for sharing your feelings about Rick Jeanneret as well. It was great to talk with you.
It's also very fun to talk hockey with you guys. And next time we'll talk Blue Jays and Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero. I'll study them there on what they're doing, and we'll be able to talk about it.
There you go, man. I'll try and pull some strings and get you in the booth with Buck. That would be something. I'd love that, Marty.
That would be really cool. I just want to get to a game. I haven't been to a Jays game in a while. And I see all my buddies in Toronto at Jays game. I just want to get to a game, but I chase my kids all summer long, so I don't have a lot of time.
Well, enjoy doing that, man. Thanks for making time for us.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Marty Biron joining us on the Maple Toyota hotline. Build your next dream Toyota at Maple Toyota. Check out Maple Toyota's pre-owned inventory arriving daily. It's time to Toyota. Visit mapletoyota.com. That was a fun chat. Don't go anywhere. More OverDrive continues on TSN 4, TSN 1050, and the iHeartRadio app. Welcome back to OverDrive on TSN 4, TSN 1050, and the iHeartRadio app. My name is Brendan Dunlop. Happy to be riding here in the OverDrive studios alongside Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. You've covered quite a few soccer tournaments. You were in Tokyo when the Canadian women's national team won the gold medal 2 years ago. Doesn't that feel like 5 years ago?
It does, man. That whole pandemic era, we did 2 Olympics in 6 months between Tokyo and Beijing. And, I don't even remember much about either one of them, to be honest with you. Because they were both in bubbles. And
Yeah, they were.
They weren't particularly memorable. Certainly, there were some great performances. But, outside of that, in terms of what we were doing over there, the answer was not much.
It messes with your sense of time.
Yeah.
Because though it was, at probably reasonably timed hours for you when you were there, you were working for an audience that had you up at all hours of the night. Much like our next guest, who
Yes.
I'm sure is looking forward to sleeping through the end of August at a more regular schedule and getting her circadian rhythm back in rhythm. Amy Walsh, Olympian, Canadian Soccer Hall of Famer, and TSN World Cup analyst during this Women's World Cup. Amy, how are you?
I'm doing well. I am very much looking forward to having a regular night's sleep instead of a couple of naps a day to try to cobble together a decent amount of sleep. And
Honestly.
Speaking of things seeming like a long time ago, doesn't Hannah Wilkinson's World Cup opening goal for New Zealand seem like that was about 2 years ago? It does for me.
It you know what? It does feel like that. At the same time, too, though, I do. This felt like such a long tournament, but also like a fast tournament. In ways, it seems like Canada bowed out 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. But at the same time, I was surprised to settle in for that final. And when it dawns on you that the tournament is over, it often feels like, how did we get here already? Like already, at the final stage, already with a champion being crowned, and a new champion in the incredible way that it was. But it was a really, really interesting tournament to watch. The coverage was fantastic on TSN. I loved hearing you in the play-by-play booth with Luke Wildman during the Canada games, and seeing you laugh at all hours of the morning in studio with your co-host and analyst.
Yeah.
But reflecting and looking back on the whole tournament, one that we really thought would be so important and be a real flagship monumental moment for the sport. Just give me some of your takes on the end of that now.
Yeah, I think first off is that there were concerns even from me that, thinking back to 2019 in France and that, those terrible, disrespectful celebrations by the U.S. when they absolutely trounced Thailand 13-0. I was expecting more of that disparity to be on display, and I was pleasantly surprised that this tournament was not that. This tournament was all about kind of the underdogs surprising the favorites, and then I thought maybe some of that would kind of equalize or the playing field, or the underdogs would sort of come down from that high and everything would sort of shake out the way we expected it to in match day 2 and match day 3. But there continued to be surprises. And I think the narrative throughout was that, there was more occasions for the talent to be on display with these new teams that were included with the bump from 24 to 32 teams. And then I think you also saw a jump and a leap and the progress in terms of the tactical sophistication and just the general savvy of these players and the way that they were coached, so that they were much more difficult sides to break down. They were less naive. And there was actually less space for kind of your superstars to operate. So the ones that did stand out, they really made their mark on this tournament, and they were often young ones. And so it's a little bit of a changing of the guard. You mentioned Canada bowing out, but the U.S. also bowed out. Germany did. France went down to kind of a gritty Australian side and everything that they did to galvanize their country and the support that we saw there on display. And so it was a little bit, those big signs that I saw walking through Toronto with Megan Rapinoe and Christine Sinclair and Marta on there, like they're giving way now to new faces of the game, and the Paraluelos and the Linda Caicedos and the Mary Fowlers, the Lauren Jameses, the Melchi Dumornays. So it's a really exciting time for women's soccer, because certainly there was a lot of quality on the pitch, and it was just a spectacle. And I was privileged to cover it and to get to take in as much soccer as I did.
Well, Amy, I got to tell you, the fascinating team for me was the champion team, because I read about this Spanish team, and it kind of had echoes of Canada. There was some before the tournament, the year leading up to the tournament, there was a lot of dissent within the group. There was complaints that they weren't, preparing properly, that the staff wasn't big enough. Certainly a lot of friction with the head coach, Jorge Vilda, right? Jorge Vilda.
Yeah,
and,
Jorge Vilda, yeah.
Yeah, and my question was, like, were you surprised that they triumphed over all that internal dissent, and including, clearly not loving their coach, not loving their situation, and yet winning the World Cup in such grand fashion?
Yeah, I think I was surprised, but I was really pleased to see them do it. Because again, it's that all of the teams that you mentioned in South Africa boycotting their last preparatory games before the World Cup, Jamaica having to crowdfund to get there, Nigeria having their own issues with the federation, Colombia up against it, even Canada, as you alluded to. But really, it's a kind of a hallmark, unfortunately, of while there's been progress in the women's game, there's been simultaneous issues and problems with federations, and it highlights a paradox in the women's game, that despite this rapid growth, they sometimes players have to sacrifice their careers. So if you look back at Spain's first World Cup in 2015 in Canada, their captain at the time, the team protested after the fact because there were issues with them there and an abusive coach, and then a lot of them stood up, much the way that 15 did last year to Jorge Vilda and to the Spanish Federation, and she never played for her country again. And so you're seeing the same thing repeat itself. It's like we don't seem to learn. So like the product on the pitch is advancing, but everything outside the pitch in terms of the support for these women still continues to falter. And it's so frustrating for me to watch that. And you look at the Spanish team and how talented they were. They were missing potentially their 3 best players. So with Alexia Putellas getting that ACL injury just before the Euros last year, sort of doesn't get enough time to sort of feature more prominently in the tournament because she didn't reach full fitness. You see the emergence of a Bon Mati, and she wins the golden ball and in that more advanced role, which is sort of available to her because Putellas can't be there, but also because Patry is not there. She's left at home because she boycotts it. You see Paredes and Codina as the two center backs. Mappy Leon is maybe one of the best center backs in the game, also not there because she's left outside the squad. And Panos, their number one keeper, before they going in, the coach claimed that it was technical issues that she's not chosen. So all the talent that was there and how they performed in spite of all this is just remarkable, but it could have been so much better if you included all of those players. So the players deserve to be celebrated, but I also have special kind of thoughts and consideration for those players who are at home and had to watch their compatriots and they had to watch their teammates celebrate and lift that World Cup, and they weren't there with them.
I'm glad you said that about the players that weren't going to put themselves in the situation to play under those conditions and to play for that manager. I can't think of another situation in any sport where it's been so known that the team hates the way things are being operated and hates the person in charge of the team sheet that has been able to succeed like that. I mean, you look back at that final two, they went in as the bookies' slight favorites, which I think was just a tease to get more money on England, to be honest.
Okay.
But look at how that match played out. And as you said, they could have been even better, this Spanish team. I honestly think it's one of the most remarkable championship stories in sports.
Yeah, I think you also have to mention kind of the flip side of that. Like, players not liking their head coach is not a new thing, whether it's women's football or men's football or in sport, right? You don't play, you usually don't like your coach. So there's that bitterness, there can be that hatred that emerges. But, while there were no allegations of illegal behaviors, there was talk of power imbalances, intimidation, lack of resources. They didn't agree with his training methods or even, say, his tactics. But it wasn't just one or two or three players. It was a significant portion of, say, their usual roster. So I think that deserves to be looked at. But I think deeper than that, it's the federation. And you look at the disgusting and gross and inappropriate behavior of Luis Rubiales, the head of the Spanish FA, forcing himself on Jenny Hermoso in that line, standing next to the Spanish queen. And he grabs his crotch in the stands. Like, as he's celebrating, he plants a kiss on Carmona, who scores the winning goal. She finds out afterwards she's lost her dad, and he plants a kiss on her cheek. Just absolutely repugnant behavior. And I mean, if that is what's happening at the federation, then FIFA has to step in and do something so there's a reckoning for these federations. Because as I said, it's not just issues with the Spanish Federation. This is an issue. This is problematic in the women's game, and it has to improve so that the players can focus on the performance. And you've seen what they could do. So imagine if they had that support. But what a final. I sort of got off track there. But I mean, I think that England came out a little bit flat, and all credit to Spain because they played the way that I expected them to. Short passes to cut open lines of play, very direct. Bonmati getting high up the pitch. Vilda actually makes a good call to start Paraluelo, who had been a game breaker, kind of coming up off the bench in the previous games against the Netherlands and Sweden, and then changes those games both times. Like, what a player she is. She wins the best young player of the tournament. But I think most impressively from Spain was how they smothered England. They just completely stifled them in the middle of the park. They won that midfield, and they didn't allow them to really use any of their pace up front and get anything going on the attack. So I think it was more than anything, it was their defensive prowess that won them that game.
Amy, we talked about a little bit about the problems at the Canadian Soccer Federation, and there's a spill-off from that, you could say, in the story that TFC, the local soccer club here in Toronto, is looking for a new coach, and they appear to be looking at John Herdman, who is obviously the head coach of the men's national team. If Herdman, we don't know what's going to happen here. We do know that there have been reports that there's been serious talks about Herdman coming to TFC. What would it say about the state of Canadian soccer at the national level if Herdman chose a club team in Toronto over being the head coach of a team that's about to go to a domestic World Cup in a few years?
Yeah, I don't. If those rumors are true, then I think we all know the state of affairs with our federation, with Canada Soccer. It's not good. The women have just sold out BMO Field for their clash against Jamaica in September. So that's great news. It shows that there's an appetite to watch this team play locally, which they don't get very many games in Canada. But yeah, to Herdman, I think that obviously maybe he's looking for a new challenge because he's not getting the support from Canada Soccer. But I think if it goes wrong for him, and certainly, I watched them play yesterday against CF Montreal, and CF Montreal did very well. I was happy to see my team win there. But you see, I think still a fractured team, and I think really missing Richie Larea no longer being there, and what a player he is. But yeah, I think if he tests the waters in club and things don't go well, then where does he go from there? So I see it being a risky move for Herdman. I mean, perhaps he's looking for a fresh start somewhere, because it can have been easy. But I mean, with the Home World Cup on the horizon, I would be very surprised if that comes to fruition.
Me too. That's my feeling. We'll get into it more with a friend of the show, Josh Gloak, later in the week as maybe this story transpires. But I agree with you there, Amy. I think it says a lot about the Federation. It's such a strange scenario where someone who's been as successful as him would consider, with a Home World Cup on the horizon, taking a club job for a team that's in a real crisis themselves. But I do love that you found a way with this entire month of talking about international football to get your Montreal bias in at the first available opportunity there.
I had to get that in there, yeah.
Very professional. I look forward to listening to you on. You're doing the TSN Montreal radio English broadcast. Am I right? For the rest of the season?
That's right. Yeah, I'm on the sideline for those. Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, it was great to watch you. I love seeing the clips of your podcast, the broadcast with your friends there, Ryan Wilkinson and Claire Rustad, who I really like how much I think I wouldn't say vulgar, but
you like all the swearing?
Yeah, I like this. Well, the swearing's good. I like the swearing, Amy. You tell it like it is, and that's exactly why we like talking to you.
Well, that's great. I appreciate it, but it was something I had to keep in check, being on TSN in the wee hours of the morning. Yes. I had to really make sure that some of those swear words weren't slipping through.
Not too comfortable there. Well, they've got the 7-second delay bleep button, so you would have been fine. You would have been okay.
Okay.
Amy, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much. We'll look forward to talking soccer with you again soon.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Amy Walsh there. You can follow her on Twitter, Amy13Walsh. She made a lot of good points there about John Herdman and a lot of good points about the Federation. And yeah, honestly, that Spanish story, what they've overcome is crazy.
I think it's remarkable.
Yeah.
When you start, the more you read about that team, they hate the coach and the trouble with the Federation. You saw the head of the Federation plant the kiss on the lips that's been seen around the world, and he's had to apologize for, but speaks to, it probably says a lot about the way the Federation treats the women's team, right?
Really?
And yet they won.
And she's totally right that it's not the first team to dislike the coach.
No.
But the team that collectively, ahead of a World Cup, came out and said, we will not play. And you had star players retire far before their careers would have dictated that they needed to.
But maybe it was for the best.
It's so hard to dictate. Well, wait for the Netflix documentary, then we'll figure it all out.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, they went with a younger team.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the veterans just had enough of the nonsense, didn't want to play for that coach, didn't want to play for that federation. Went pretty well for them.
That it did. Well, Dave, it's something to chew on, which we should do on the other side. Time to take a break on OverDrive. You're watching on TSN 4, listening on TSN 1050 and the iHeartRadio app. Time for something to chew on. Something to chew on is brought to you by Boston Pizza. This summer, whether you're in Moose Jaw or you're out in Moncton, there's a BP patio near you. Join us for a long lunch or a late night. See you for a pint on the patio soon. I'm definitely going to do that this week.
Oh, yeah.
Sit on the patio.
Love it.
Yeah. Although the smog and the humidity in this city. I spent 4 weeks this summer in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing that they don't have. Humidity and smog. Although they're dealing with some fire smoke.
They get
right
smoke.
So it's a little different. But I'm looking forward to sitting on the patio. So chewing on, though, a very good Blue Jays question, which we kind of teased off the top. What's your level of concern that the Toronto Blue Jays will miss the playoffs?
You know what? It's a pint on the patio right now. It really is, to use the scale that we sometimes do on this great show. I know Seattle's been hot.
Yeah.
They're rolling. They've passed the Blue Jays. They're a half game up for that third wild card spot as the Blue Jays sit idle tonight and will go into a 3-game set against Baltimore beginning tomorrow night. But Seattle's been very hot. Julio Rodriguez is absolutely on fire, tearing it up at the plate. And that's worrisome because you also look at, Seattle's got, by some measures, the 5th easiest schedule from here on out. But here's a couple reasons why I'm not too worried. Because Seattle's got an easy schedule. The Jays have a relatively easy schedule. I believe they have the 8th easiest schedule in Major League Baseball coming home in terms of the win-loss record of their opponents. They faced the toughest, they faced the Orioles 3 times. They got the Rays 6 times, the Jays do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Rays are going to be hard-pressed to keep it going here. I think the Rays are vulnerable with the Wander Franco situation and the injuries they've had. So I'm not too worried.
They got to take those games off the Rays. It's Baltimore that scares me.
Yeah.
And at the end of this week, if we're talking about them getting swept or looking trash against Baltimore, then it's going to be full panic buttons.
You might have to add a couple shots.
The level of concern on Thursday,
fine.
yeah, you might be looking for some complimentary shots to go along with that pint on the patio. That would be it. So the concern is less now than it will be at the end of this Orioles series because I think they're losing this series. It's just about how many games they lose in this series to Baltimore coming up. Overdrive brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Lots more to come on Overdrive. Don't change the channel.